And welcome everyone to Thursday night digital discussion. Glad to be with you. I'm John Harry. I'm the collections and digitization specialist at the Milwaukee County Historical Society. And we'll get to the program in just a second about how to record your family's history as we get closer to the oral history, rather, as we get closer to the holidays. As we get settled in to talk about the subject of how to do that, just want to remind you that we are open Wednesdays through Saturdays, 9:30 to 5. And our gift shop is open. So getting into the holiday season at the Milwaukee County Historical Society means that we have some great gifts. And we've got our book sale coming up, not this weekend, but next weekend. So if you were looking for some pretty cool books, either for yourself or to give as gifts, some of them are antiques. Some of them are a little newer too. But you can find some great deals. So you should check our website, MilwaukeeHistory.net, or our Facebook page for more info on our book sale coming up next week. But tonight we have a program that is Home for the Holidays, how to record your family's oral histories. So let's just dive right into it. So a little bit more about me. Again, my name is John Harry. I am the collections and digitization specialist at the Milwaukee County Historical Society. So a lot of times that might be like dealing with artifacts that are physical, but then also taking the physical things like artifacts, photographs, correspondences, and making them digital and available to you, the public. My background, I just got my master's in public history from UW-Milwaukee. I was the 2019 summer intern at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History with their beer and brewing historian. And that's kind of where my passion for oral history started. We got to do a bunch of oral histories with people involved in the history of beer and brewing and more recent history too in the United States. So that was pretty cool. And then where my affinity for talking to people comes from is I was a former radio personality. So for 10 years, I did radio before I went back to grad school. And so interviewing for me is kind of something that comes naturally, luckily. But interviewing for something like a radio versus an oral history interview is pretty different. You're doing something for a very different reason. For the radio, you're usually promoting something or, looking to just get to something quick, whereas an oral history interview is much more on the interviewee. So let's get into more about what we do at the Milwaukee County Historical Society. So we have oral history collections at the Milwaukee County Historical Society, and you can see them listed there. So the Many Voices of Milwaukee County, that's kind of more of a broad category of people of all different walks of life, professions, you name it, backgrounds. That's kind of the where those interviews go. We have everywhere from Sheldon and Marianne Lubar, who are huge, business philanthropists in the area, all the way to what you'll see is my wife's grandma is in that collection, and she's lived in the Milwaukee area her whole life. So that's the broad range that you get in that collection. The COVID-19 Milwaukee Oral History Collection, that's kind of where our oral history program got born out of, is during the early days of the pandemic, we wanted to record it. And we thought, what better way than to get people on tape talking about their experiences and making a historical record. So that's that collection. And then it's Milwaukee. So beer and brewing runs in our blood here. So we've gotten a lot of beer and brewing oral histories already recorded too. And they just are all available to you now at the website you see there. So MilwaukeeHistory.net/research/oral history collections. So if you just go to the homepage and then you'll find your way there. I can put the link in there later on, or if somebody else wants to, they can do that too. But that's what we have going on at the Milwaukee County Historical Society. This is kind of a different thing because those interviews are talking very broadly, maybe about Milwaukee history, and they're not as personal. What we're talking about tonight, though, is doing an oral history for your family, which is the most personal thing that you can do. You're getting to know somebody at a different level when they do an oral history interview like this. So let's start with what is an oral history to begin with. So the Oral History Association's definition is an oral history is a field of study and a method of gathering, preserving, and interpreting the voices and memories of people, communities, and participants in past events. That's pretty broad. You're basically creating a record. So this is the slide of why should you create your family's oral history. Because what you're doing is creating a record of somebody's life, which might be really valuable for genealogists. It might be valuable for researchers years and years and years from now. Because no matter how, you know, if your family is not famous or what, not well known, that doesn't matter when it comes to oral histories. You know, the big hole in the collections of every historical society is the life of everyday people. And so what you're doing is creating that record of a life of everyday people. It matters where you go out to eat. It matters what you do for work. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how much power or influence you have. It just matters that you exist in the first place. And so that's one reason, is just creating that record. Now, generations from now, genealogists for your family might really be interested in hearing these stories, because that's where that personal connection comes in, and you're creating a very personal connection of somebody's life, maybe your own life at some point. So there's something there. I put legacy gift on the list. As we get toward the holidays, especially, think about gifting an oral history to somebody. Think about doing this and then saying, you know, I'm not getting you socks or something this year or whatever. I'm giving you the gift of a family heirloom of, you know, the story of our family being handed down through generations. So beyond the legacy creation of an oral history, you're also making memories in doing this. You know, the example I'm going to use this tonight is my wife's grandmother. And just the act of doing an oral history creates a memory, because you got to ask the questions that you always wanted to ask, and you actually got to do it. And time is precious. So my 4 grandparents are all deceased, and there are no oral histories that exist of any of them. And that is a very painful thing, to think about, that I could have done something to create that record of their life, that experience. And at the very least, you're also getting they're either, you know, you're putting them on film if you're taping them, or you're recording them. So you get to hear their voice. You get to see them talk about their life. So when you miss them a lot in the future, you can pop that on. And so, like, it's not just a historical record. It's a therapy type of thing too. And so, you know, we'll get to it, but like, anything is better than nothing. I wish I would have done more when my grandparents were still alive. And that's kind of the spirit that you take into this, thinking about family members. It doesn't matter how old you are. Everybody can have an oral history. A 10-year-old can have an oral history. They've lived life. This is a record of their life when they were 10 years old. Now, usually you start thinking about oral histories as people get older, and which makes sense, right? You think, well, time is more limited. But, you know, I'm just thinking about, my dad is 66 years old. Right now is a fine time to do an oral history. And then you can always do another oral history in 15 years if you're like, well, let's do another one. Let's update this. So it's, you know, it's always just get the record while you can. You can do it with anybody at any age. And if you look at our collections online, you'll see that we've done it with a wide range of people. I should mention, if you have any questions, just pop those in the comments too. We'll do a whole Q&A at the end if you have any questions. So what are you going to need if you're going to decide to do your family's oral history? Well, first you need to pick your interviewer. That's really, really important. So you're going to, you know, you want to pick somebody who can do the interview and not get too emotional about things, because, you know, you might cover some really emotional topics, and you want to make sure you get that record of that person's life. That's the most important thing. And it you know, bias takes place within an interview. So it might be that you want to do your family's oral history interview, and you can pay people to do them if you want to. Or you can find somebody in the family and just be like, I think you'd be really good to talk to this person, and I don't even want to be in the room. I want to see it later. You know, it's also, if a family member doesn't want to be interviewed, or they're like, you know, I don't want this to be seen by anybody until after I die, that's okay too. You can, you know, the person who is getting the interview done is the person in control. But beyond the personnel, you're going to need some equipment. A recorder is helpful. Now, the recorder that I have pictured here is a Zoom H4n. That's like a $250 recorder. that's like what NPR uses. That's on the level we have at the Historical Society. You don't need to go that in depth. If you're really going to get into an oral history project, or you're going to start podcasting or something like that, I recommend something like this. But honestly, your phone has a voice notes app on it. So like, that's okay. There's a million apps out there. Like I said, anything is better than nothing. You can get a camcorder. So the oral history, the interview that we'll feature tonight, it was done on video. So you can do a whole videotaping thing. And then I always, no matter what you're doing, do headphones so you can make sure that the quality is at least somewhat good. And then make sure you have a notepad with your questions too, so you can write notes as people talk. If you come up with follow-up questions, you don't want to be interrupting people while they're recounting their memories. So after that, you have those two things. You got to pick a location. Oftentimes you're going to want to pick a location that's quiet-ish. If there's noise in the background, sometimes that's okay. But the most important thing is you're picking a location that the interviewee is comfortable with. So a lot of times that's going to be like where they live, their living room, however you want to go about it. But that's kind of like how you would pick that. And then your questions, and we'll get into questions in a little bit. So just kind of stick a pin in that one. Before you even do the interview, though, you want to do a pre-interview. So you're going to talk with the person about that you want to interview about what's going to happen. The big, huge thing here is consent. You want to make sure that you're on the same level, that they know what's going to happen with the interview. At the Historical Society, we have a release form, which spells out like, the rights go to us because this is a recording. And so like the interview belongs to the person being interviewed. And so if you want to do something extra with the interview, then you want to make sure you might want to get that in writing, because you want to make sure that it's that the intent of the interview is being carried forth. Where if they're like, I only want family members to see this, I don't want this to go anywhere, that is like written somewhere. On the flip side, if they want to donate it to like the Milwaukee County Historical Society at some point, because it is no different than a family photo album or a box of letters, it's just another source, then get that in writing too, because you would need that to be able to hand it over to an institution like the Historical Society. So a pre-interview, though, to explain, here's what we're going to do, here's kind of what we're going to talk about, here's what's going to happen. And explaining it, putting people at ease is really important, because it helps them talk more, and it helps you get a fuller picture of their life as you go into an experience like this. So what kind of questions should you ask? Well, I always start with background questions. So where and when were you born? What were your parents' names and what did they do? Where did you go to school? What did you do for work? How did you meet your spouse? Stuff like that. And then you can kind of dive deeper from family life into like professionals and career. And so, what did you do for work? And then what made you want to go into that for work? Did you study something in school that led you to that point? Questions that elicit emotions are, that's what kind of makes this different than a normal interview, is that you can kind of let the interview breathe, because there's not like a time limit on this. So you can ask, especially like a family member, you can be like, what was it like when you and your spouse got divorced? That, and that's where you like setting those ground rules, because they control the interview. So if they don't want to talk about something like that's a hot button topic, like a divorce or something, or a death or something like that, they can say, I don't want to go there. And that's okay. And you just say, okay, I'm not going to do that. It's their interview. But really, it's anything that you want to know. And as long as they haven't said beforehand, like, nope, don't want to learn about that, or I don't want to talk about that, like, that's kind of fair. But they also can say as much as they want. So if you're only getting one-word answers out of things, maybe go in a different direction, right? They're in control. This is how I start an interview. You got to set the stage. So you see the form at the top, and then how I like play it out at the bottom. So my name is John Harry, and today I am interviewing Claire Kutz. So that's my wife's grandma. I am the grandson-in-law to Claire. It's really important that you add in your relationship. that is the bias that you're bringing to the interview, and the people who are watching it in 100 years have a right to know who you are in relation to that person, because it changes the whole tone of the interview. If I had done, if Claire's daughter had done the interview, she would answer the questions differently than me doing the interview as somebody who's a little bit more removed. I'm the grandson-in-law to Claire. Always put the date, because you're creating that record. It's that time stamp kind of thing. And then also, it wasn't true in this interview, but I wanted to include it here. You got to include whoever is in the room with you, because it changes how people answer questions. So I put in there, also present is Claire's granddaughter, Ricky. So that's my wife. So I would, if she would have been there, I would have said something like that to let people know that she was there. So it might be affecting the answers that the interviewee is giving. And then finally, we're at Claire's apartment in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. So setting that place, she might, have a different tone if she was at the Historical Society downtown. So it's important to set the space, because it is the source that you're creating for generations to come. You want to give as much detail as you can. Again, if you have any questions, just pop them in the comments. Things to remember during the interview. I mentioned this once before, but it's really important. Try not to interrupt the interviewee. It's their oral history. So they are the author of their oral history. You are the guide. So as you're asking questions, you're helping them author, in a sense, of a spoken memoir. But it's not like, because you could put together a memoir that's like a recording, but usually memoirs are more thought out. Oral histories are much more candid. And so you wouldn't usually share questions beforehand with your interviewee. And it's not like kind of a gotcha thing. It's just more because you want them to think in the moment. But you are the guide of their oral history. So you are leading them through their life and their personal experiences, in part so they don't have to think about it. So that they can kind of say, okay, I'll just answer these questions, because talking about your life and talking about memories is not an easy thing to do. And recollecting things that happened decades ago is not an easy thing to do. And so you're taking something off of them at a certain point by doing this interview, and kind of getting things out there as much as you can. So I interviewed my wife's grandma, Claire. Grandma Claire is awesome, by the way. So she's 84 years old, I think. And she was all in on this. And I love this because now we have this recorded. And so it's not going to happen like with my grandparents. Like, we will always have a record of how awesome Grandma Claire was. So I figured a good thing to do would be to let you see some of the, kind of how the questions might have developed, and how some of her answers. So here's it's about a 5-minute video of Grandma Claire, with I put question headings in there. So we'll regroup after this. If you have any questions, again, put them in the comments.
Actually, but we lived, the first apartment that my mother and dad had was down on 13th and Cherry in Milwaukee. And they moved from there when I was a baby. And then they bought a house in a little subdivision called Cozy Dell, and it was off of 27th Street between Grange and Ramsey. And at that time, it was all fields, farms, and then our little nucleus of houses. Oh, when we moved away from Cozy Dell, then my mom and dad bought a house on 90th and Montana in West Dallas. And then I went to Johnson School. And that was huge compared to what I was used to. It was a pretty tough transition for me. And I went there until I graduated from 8th grade. And then I went to West Milwaukee High School. And college was not an option, unfortunately, because no money, yeah.
Did you ever go into downtown, into Milwaukee at this point?
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because once a year, this was back when the rapid transit was still in existence, my mother would take me on the rapid transit. We would go downtown, in the downtown area, and shop, and we'd always have lunch at Woolworth's lunch counter, and I would always get a BLT with French fries. That was my favorite. And yeah, once a year, just my mom and I, and that was special. That was really special. I started looking for a job. They were very plentiful, and I had the qualifications to be a secretary. And I applied at the electric company and the telephone company, and they both would have hired me right away. And I went with the telephone company. And
secretary there.
yeah, and I started out, they had like a satellite office on 32nd and Clyburn. And that since has closed. So then I transferred to the downtown office on Broadway. And I worked there for 9.5 years till I started my family.
And what would you, when you would date, where would you go? What sort of?
We like to dance. I'm not a dancer, but I could dance with him. And there was a place on 16th and Mitchell called Doc Perkos. And we would go there, and our favorite dance was the polka. We're in Wisconsin now, you know. we would go there a lot and just dance and have a few beers well, I like music. I love live performances, and I've seen some big stars. There was a little place downtown Milwaukee on 6th and Wisconsin called the Brass Rail. And they would have some pretty big name performers there, and I love jazz. So I got to see Dave Brubeck, and I got to see Billie Holiday. And at that time, I didn't know that much about how bad her personal life was. But she got up on that stage, very elegant, big white flower in her hair, and opened her mouth, and that voice, oh my goodness, it was just smooth. And they would have a jazz festival. I don't know if it was every year, but if it was, I was there. And I got to see Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Nat King Cole. And one concert that I remember in particular was really wild. They had Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich, the two best drummers, and they were together in the same show, and they had a drum duel. I would, on payday, I would head down there, and I had to take a streetcar and then walk down this hill by the Veterans Cemetery there and get down to the stadium, stand in line, get my tickets. If I remember correctly, bleacher seats were 50 cents. And I used to take my youngest brother a lot. Or I'd go with my girlfriends, and then we would wait outside after the games and try to get pictures of the players, and I had this big major crush on Eddie Matthews, third baseman. And yeah, we went to a lot of games. And then when they played in Chicago, we would go down there, a group of us, and we would stay at the Edgewater Beach Hotel, which is now gone. And we're right on the lake. And then we'd go to the game. And then the players stayed at that hotel. So we would go downstairs in the morning and sit in the coffee shop for having our breakfast and just watch the players. That's,
There we go. Put my mic back on. So that's Grandma Claire. She's a delightful, just human being. Love her a lot. Her whole interview, if you want to hear more about Grandma Claire's life, you can check it out. It's in our Many Voices of Milwaukee County collection at our website. I'll actually try to get that up right now. I'll put it in the chat. Anyway, while I'm figuring that out, let me talk about like after you do the interview. So that's just part of it, right? You've done all this work, you've done all these questions, you've gotten the family member to agree to do an interview, and then what? So there's a few different file formats that you would want to use. Obviously, we're past the days of putting things on videotape or like a cassette tape. Please don't do that because somebody's going to need to get it off there at some point and the quality is going to be horrible. but you're going to want to use WAV or MP4. So WAV, if it's just a sound file and no video, you're going to want to use WAV. MP4 is the preferred file type for preservation for if you're doing video. So we're talking about like long-term preservation copies that will last well into the future. Is what you want. So I'm just going to paste this link in real quick. So there's the link to all of our oral history collections. You can kind of see how we do it. And, you know, maybe that's a great thing, is just to like listen to a bunch of them and be like, oh, okay, I get some of the questions that we ask. The big thing with preservation is save it in a lot of places, because, you know, the digital world is not as secure as the analog world, the world of things you can actually touch, like a videotape, which is funny because the quality is better, but it's actually, you know, degrades a lot quicker. So save it in as many places as you can. We try to save things in 3 places. So on a computer, so just your home computer, great. Eventually that's going to be obsolete. You're going to get rid of that. You're going to get a new computer. Put it on an external hard drive. That's also great, because then you're like, okay, I know I have important things on this hard drive. And then finally, cloud storage. So basically, cloud storage is somebody else's hard drive that you're storing something on through a network. So Apple has cloud storage, Dropbox, there's different things. Usually you have to pay a little bit. But again, like maybe it's just a place where you keep all your sensitive, important files. And that's just kind of the way things are now. DVDs. So you might want to make a DVD for a family member. And that's cool, but don't use that as like the primary means of preserving it, because DVDs, you're losing the quality and it's going to break at some point and scratch and all that stuff. Same thing with flash drives. Flash drives are not meant for long-term storage. They're meant to, you know, transfer files around, keep things on short term, just so you have somewhere they are, even though they're huge now. They're not meant for that. But do the best with what you have. So if the only thing you have is a flash drive and the only thing you have for equipment is your iPhone, do it. Fine. Like, again, you want to do this, you know, as good as you can, but anything is better than nothing. So just make sure you do that. All right, next is resources. So we're getting to the end. So if you have any questions, pop those in the comments. I see a couple of questions already. But I am a resource at the Milwaukee County Historical Society, the whole Historical Society, by the way. You can reach out to any of us. But in particular, I'm the one that's dealing with oral histories right now. So jharry@milwaukeehistory.net is my email. Shoot me an email. And we'll try to, if you're struggling with how to do this or you want some guidance, I'd be happy to walk you through the process again. Obviously, this video, hopefully I answered any questions. If you look up the Oral History Association online, they have a lot of tutorials on there on how to do it. The Wisconsin Veterans Museum, they've helped us a lot in getting our program off the ground. They do just an amazing job recording the history of veterans throughout the state. And we use the same software as them, actually. And so they have different tutorials on their websites too. So, you know, I got to, you know, give a shout to them that they're really a great organization when it comes to oral histories. And then finally, you can find at the Smithsonian, they know what they're doing too. So if you go to, you know, type in, you know, Google Smithsonian oral histories, how to, or something like that, you're going to find resources there too. So, you know, there's some options there, but if you just are looking for a friendly face that, you know, I'm here for you. So shoot me an email and we'll see what we can do as far as any problems that you might be running into or any fears or issues. It's a big decision to do this. I'm going to say that it's not, you realize in the moment of doing a family member's oral history that this is maybe the only time you're going to get to do it. And so you want to make sure you're doing it right. And so I get any hesitation, but at some point you got to get through it because time is precious and you want to make sure that you get these things documented. So now is the time for questions. So feel free to put those in the chat. Start with one that came in a little bit ago as I take a quick sip of water. So this is from Cindy. So what do you recommend for someone who wants to write their own oral history? I I've gone through a lot in my life and keep getting told I need to write a book. Fair. But I don't know where to even start to put it down on paper. So, I'd say just start, start writing, like what memories, or ask people what they want to know about. So when they talk about doing an oral history, what are some of the things that are really interesting in your life? What are some of those things that they are? This is where an interviewer might help, because it might help draw some things out, even if you're not recording it, or you could record it just for yourself. And then that's like kind of like you're dictating your oral histories, and then you can shine it up. But then, so that's the difference. It's not, oral histories are not a memoir. They're their own thing. It's a candid style of interview. It's meant to be live and done in person and in the settings that you're doing it in. Sometimes those things, you might do 3 days of 2 hours of interviews for some people. Grandma Claire's interview we did in 45 minutes, but we could go much, much further in depth with a lot of things too. So that's up to you and to the interviewee as far as, what goes on. But if you're, want to write it, like, again, anything is better than nothing. So please do write down your memories, at the very least. So I hope, Cindy, that answers your questions. Again, you reach out to me on email or in the chat or whatever, and we'll get to it. And then Bonnie, our friend at the Waukesha County Historical Society, is reaching out. Here is a posting here. Has anyone ever contacted you after interviewing, wanting to clarify or alter an answer they gave? And how do you handle those conversations? Not yet, no. I think for most people that we are interviewing, they're kind of like, why do you want to know about me? Why do you care so much about my life? And we're like, well, there's, there are reasons. So, we haven't had that happen at the Milwaukee County Historical Society yet. I could see that happening at some point in the future. Of course, people want to see their oral histories. We just put our oral histories up today, like I said, so you can find those links. I just put those in the comments not long ago. So maybe after people see them, they're like, oh, I didn't mean that way. Or that's different than I thought I was saying it. Something like that. In which case, I don't know. Like at that point for us, you've already signed a release form. It's already in our possession. If you want to do another oral history interview, we could figure that out. We could put a note on the file if it's something huge. But yeah, I don't, it's, I think that'd be open to, depending on the person, depending on the question, depending on what they want to clarify, something like that, then it would be something worth talking about. Otherwise not. Now, if it's a family member's oral history interview and they see it and they're like, oh God, again, that's their oral history interview. So if they're like, you have to destroy this, you kind of got to, right? Same thing if like during the interview, they're like, you know what, enough of this. I don't want to do this. I don't want anyone to see this. This is a bad idea, too much, whatever. And they're just like, I'm done. This is over. Again, same thing. You're out of luck. And so, consent is huge. This is your own story. This is the most personal thing that you can give somebody. So yeah. So I hope that answered your question. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but again, I'll monitor the feeds on our YouTube and Facebook where we're broadcasting this tonight, as well as if anybody has any emails, or I can put my email address back up right here. So jharry@milwaukeehistory.net. If you have any questions that you want to put in the chat, or if you think of something later, just do that. But I hope this inspired people to do oral histories with their family, or at least broach the subject. We're getting toward the holidays. Last year a lot of us weren't with family members, and so hopefully this will broach the subject to be like, hey grandma, hey dad, can we get your name, your voice, your video? Let's record this. Let's do this. Then you don't have to think about it anymore. So you can at least say that you did that. And so again, I'm here for you. But I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation tonight, and I hope this inspires you to do oral histories with your family. Thanks a lot.